Oh,
and he
so
just
it
threw
was an
him.
inside job to some extent.
Yeah, yeah. He would befriend these people and then use what they knew, and actually worked in partnership with them. Like he took them on this road with them, or like they led him. So Drake befriended them in various ways and had them watching. So they told him, "This is what happens. This is how it works." And Drake had them in the jungle watching for this annual mule train to set off. And when it did, they came running down to Drake's camp on the beach and said, "It's started. It's left Panama, or it's starting to be loading onto the pack mules. It takes days because there's like tons of bullion and there's big groups of people that are getting involved. So it takes a while to get all this stuff together." And they run and tell Drake, and then so I don't know remember exactly, but I think he has two attempts at this, and the first one fails, and then he comes back the next year or a couple of years later and tries again. So I'm a bit sketchy on the details of exactly which one this is, but they basically ambush the mule train in the jungle with these Cimarrones guides that are also helping them to attack the Spanish. And there's barely any guards, like there's barely anyone to prevent this happening. And they I think the first one, there's this guy, like famously there was this one of the Englishmen gets drunk and like staggers out onto the path. Like they're all lying in wait in the jungle, either side of the trackway, waiting for the thing to come along. And one of the English sailors is just drunk out of his mind, and he just staggers out of a bush, and he's like singing and like
What?
staggering towards like the mule train, like "Rah, rah, rah," like, and he just blows the whole thing. And then like the guards come running up, and it all goes to shit. And I think that's the one that fails. And they maybe get a bit, and then they have to run away, and some of them get shot and stuff. It's quite bad, and they escape, and then he comes back and he does it again, and they manage to get more of it, and then they kind of fight a running battle to get it back to their ship. So this is like a major stuff, you know. This is like, I think the Spanish Empire is massive. They've got Spanish Netherlands and all these places all over the world, right? And they've got this huge income. And I think the treasure fleet accounts for, I think it's about 25%, something like 20%, 25% of their annual income of the entire empire. You know,
Wow.
it pays for all the wars, it pays for all the soldiers, it pays for, like, they can't defend the Low Countries, they can't fund that without the treasure, you know. And then so Drake is like, well, he's just going to attack it. He just kind of takes tons of it, and this is when he starts to get really famous, you know. Like it's when everyone starts to take notice because he's really. I think this is when the Queen invites him back and all the rest of it. So this is when his
Well,
fame
because
starts really growing, and
he gets home with a whole ship
yeah,
full of gold.
yeah, kind of, yeah, basically. So it's got a huge amount of money. Like loads of things go wrong with it, and it's kind of messed up. There's like there's this is and his relationship with the Cimarrones guys is really interesting because I think the leader of them is a guy called Diego, and I think it's him or Pedro, I can't remember, and they I think his men call him Drake's shadow. He hangs around with Drake, like he just loves Drake basically, and he and Drake gives him, what does he give it? Oh yeah, so Drake takes this earlier in the voyage. He attacks and takes I think a French ship or something like that, but he ends up with this beautiful scimitar with a gold jewel encrusted scabbard, and it's worth an absolute fortune. And then, so to say thank you to these Cimarrones, these guys that live in the jungle, they're escaped slaves, they're living in huts in the jungle, and to say thank you, he gives them, you know, some bullion and stuff, and he takes the leaders of them onto his ship, and he's like, "Come down into the hold with me, I'll give you some nice stuff." And he's like pulling out bolts of silk that he's taken. He's like, "Here, you can give this silk to one of your wives and she can have dresses and stuff." And then like he turns around and this guy Pedro, the leader of the Cimarrones, is holding up Drake's beautiful golden scabbard, jewels all over it, and he's like, "Can I have this?" And then Drake says, "Yeah, okay, yeah, you can." And he gives it to him, and it's worth an absolute fortune. It's like his beautiful work of art. The gold it's worth many times more than that guy's whole village. And Drake just gives it to him,
Wow.
and it's amazing because like there was no need, they had no need to do anything like that. He could have gone, "No, no, give me that. This bolt of silk is worth more than your whole village. Like, let alone that. Like, no, you can't have that." But he doesn't. He just gives it to him. and then they say goodbye. And I think that guy is then Drake's for life, basically. And because of that gesture and his other generosity to those people, all the Cimarrones and other people like that in the region are kind of ready to flock to him with information. So whenever he then comes back in the next few years on voyages, they all know him. They're like, oh, he's that guy that will, if you tell him what the Spanish are doing, he'll give you a jewel encrusted scimitar or whatever, you know. So he's kind of, whether it was that cunning and kind of cynical, or whether it was just a flamboyant gesture, don't know. Both, maybe, you know, like he could have thought he'd just taken tons of silver. So
one jewel encrusted scimitar is a small price to pay for maybe future intelligence for getting a whole, the whole lot.
That's it entirely. But also, I think it was either that guy or another group. One of them that he helps like that at one point in the voyage ends up being his man for the next 20 years. He's like comes with him to England and he takes him around the world and stuff. I think it's one of these guys. I think there was two of them. One's called Pedro, one's called Diego. I can't remember which is the scimitar guy, but yeah, he's obviously overjoyed to have all this bullion. But then the Spanish again adapt and get wise to it. So they're like, okay, well, this is a vulnerability. We're not going to let that happen again. And they adapt and they do smaller. They guard it better, basically. There's other things that happen, like he attacks the town and they search the town for gold and they put men ashore and they have loads of gun battles and stuff. There's loads of stuff that goes on during this. It's like absolute action-packed stuff. But then basically the Spanish are starting to adapt to these kinds of raids again. So the towns, the little ports and stuff that are still kind of vulnerable are starting to build up their forts and build their walls higher and train their militia more and just protect themselves better, basically. So this is when Drake starts to raise money for a bigger voyage, the one that will eventually take him around the world. But it was only planned that he would attack the next vulnerability. So the Spanish have adapted. So then in this arms race of tactics, Drake then adapts as well and decides that he's going to sail into the Pacific Ocean, where only the Spanish have been, and that coast of Chile and Peru and the Pacific side of Panama and Mexico, that is also extremely wealthy, and they have huge amounts of gold and silver and all the rest of it going up and down that coast. But nobody's ever been there apart from Spanish. So nobody is very, very vulnerable. Nobody expects anyone to go there. So that's where Drake goes. And one of the things that people say about this point is that when he goes into the jungles of Panama to scout out the area, and I think he goes to one of these Cimarrones villages in the middle of nowhere, they say to him, oh, do you want to see the other sea? Do you want to see the South Seas, basically, which is the Pacific? And they're like, yeah. So they take Drake to this hilltop and they say, climb up this tree. So he climbs up the tree. There's like a viewing platform or something up there that they can see down to Panama, basically, the city of Panama. So Drake climbs up and looks out, and then he's the first Englishman to see the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he's obviously got that in his mind when he goes back.
Doesn't he vow that he'll be the first Englishman to sail on the Pacific?
Possibly, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that's certainly the sort of thing that he would declare for sure. So he goes back and he's extremely wealthy, and so he gets the Queen invites him to court, and he's now fabulously wealthy, and he's still just a commoner. He never loses his kind of thick Devon accent, apparently. But the Queen likes him, and he's quite charming, and he's quite well liked at court. But I can imagine the gentlemen and the lords and stuff are kind of snooty about him because he's just,
and
just
jealous at the same time.
Son of a yeoman. Oh yeah, they must have been, yeah, because he's this hero doing his amazing stuff, and you've got people like Robert Dudley and other lords that have a very, very high opinion of themselves and are brilliant men in their own way, but they tend to be quite militarily incompetent. Like I think is this where it's Dudley, or is it the Earl of Essex? I can't remember which one of them it is, but they go to Ireland. They'd have a campaign against the rebellious Irish, and Drake is involved in this at this time. He goes with some ships and he helps to break a siege, but they commit some horrific crimes against the Irish rebels and stuff. And Drake's kind of peripherally involved in this stuff, but it's not really, he's doing it out of duty or whatever. He's not really into it. It's not, he can't make a lot of money doing it because there's no money in Ireland.
Wasn't there the
effectively at war.
Rathlin Island massacre though? Rathlin Island.
Yeah, well, he wasn't. Yeah, in Ireland. Yeah. Well, like he wasn't really. I think that kind of falls on other people, not him. He kind of transported people there, and I think he was kind of horrified by it, as far as I can tell. It wasn't his thing. He was just recruited to sail the ships, basically. He wasn't in command, and it wasn't his men that committed the massacre. So he's puts together this. It takes a few years to do this stuff, but he puts together this voyage where he said he's going to sail down into the Pacific, into the South Seas, and attack the ships there. And that part of it is secret, so people know that he's gonna have a voyage. Was
it right that he didn't tell the crew that they were going on a round the world expedition? They thought they were just going to Spain or something. Yeah,
I guess I was trying to think where he told them. I think it was like to Constantinople or something. It was like somewhere weird. I can't remember. Like to Egypt or something. That's what he said. And then when they sailed past the Mediterranean, they were like, oh, okay, we're going to Africa. Fair enough. It's one of them expeditions. Okay, right. And then they don't stop at Africa. They don't go and get slaves and stuff. They sail across to South America. So they're sailing off the coast of Brazil type area. And they're like, oh, right, okay, we're doing this, are we? And then he sails down all the way down to past where Argentina will be. And then and there's this famous kind of conflict with that guy,
Thomas Doughty.
Yeah, the Doughty stuff. Yeah. So Doughty is a gentleman, right? And he's so you know about this, right? You know about the Doughty.
Well, when you're a master of a ship, or I think there was 5 ships in that when they first set out, and this guy Thomas Doughty was sort of at some point tried to make his own faction and like get people over to his side and wrest complete control away from Drake, and that's something that apparently you can't have, and Drake put it down with sort of extreme prejudice. I mean, I'm sure you know more about it than me, all the details.
Yeah, I mean that's basically it. That as this voyage starts to unfold, this guy Thomas Doughty is just causing trouble, and it seems like when they have like a trial of him later, some of the men say that he started trying to recruit them before they left England. So like the master of one of the ships and some other gentleman from another ship and the carpenter from another ship. They say, yeah, he said to me stuff like, when it comes to it, I know you'll be with me and stuff like that, like before they'd even left England. And then he continued in that vein all during the Atlantic crossing and going down the coast. And he was just stirring stuff up. And Drake seems to have given him loads of opportunities to stop it. Like he took him from one ship and sent him to another, and then he had him confined on one ship and all this kind of stuff, and there was all these like accusations of witchcraft and stuff, and it's just weird, kind of like, it seems like a really dark time. And this Thomas Doughty was poisoning the morale of the whole, not just the ship that he was on, but all of the ships. And in the end, Drake arrested him and confined him to one of the small ships. And even when he was a prisoner in the small ship, he was still causing trouble, and he was still trying to get the ship to mutiny and all this kind of stuff. And then when they got right down to the bottom of the Atlantic side of South America, what would eventually become Argentina, they put into this anchorage to steel themselves and repair themselves, and for the next part of the voyage, which is going to be going into the Pacific. And whilst he was there, he held a trial for Doughty. And they brought forth all this evidence and stuff. And Doughty was saying stuff like, we didn't know we were doing this. Like, which is a fair point. And he was saying, where is your commission from the Queen that says you can do this? And of course, Drake doesn't have that, but he just bluffs it out. And like this trial is recorded. Like loads of different people say what happened, and he's saying, like Doughty's saying, if you've got a commission, bring it out. And Drake's like, I have got a commission. It's back in my cabin, but you can't see it because I don't need to show it to you. And like my word is that everyone here knows that, I wouldn't do this without a commission from the Queen. Of course I got a commission from the Queen. And he's like, and Doughty, I think Doughty was a lawyer as well. And he's like, I demand to see it and all this stuff. And and Drake just bluffs him out, basically. He just says no. And then they have this trial, and Doughty has all these people come forward and say their pieces, like they don't want, Drake was mean to me or whatever. And Drake was kind of forced, I would say, to deal with him, because he couldn't sail into these dangerous waters with someone that poisonous on board, and he couldn't do anything else with him. He couldn't put him ashore because there's nothing there. It's just, there is no towns in that area.
It's
There's
like
nothing. The
Patagonia,
Spanish ones.
basically.
Yeah, just before you get to Patagonia. So it's the very southern part of what would become Argentina. But there's nothing there. There's not even a Spanish port. There's nothing. So you can't just put him ashore, and you can't have him on the ship either. So he tries him, and then they execute him.
Huh.
Which, again, a lot of people have said, well, this is a mark against Drake. You know, it's obviously, this is a very terrible thing to do to a senior gentleman and all the rest of it. But really, he had been put in a very difficult position, and it was kind of the best of a bad bunch of options.
Yeah, I've heard that it's like on one end of the spectrum, you could just say it's like a murder. It's like an extrajudicial killing, and he's just acting as some sort of insane tyrant. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's like it was perfectly reasonable. It was almost the only thing he could have done. It seems like you're much more on that end of the spectrum. I've got to say I'm inclined that way. Yeah,
I want to believe that, and it certainly seems that certainly some of the stuff that happened in the trial was dodgy, and I think Doughty, being a lawyer, was questioning Drake's authority to even have this trial, and he was saying, just send me back on one of the ships, and they can try me in London, and they have the authority to do that, but you don't. And then one of the captains said that he would take him back, but then Drake was like, well, I can't, that would be severely limiting my strength, so we're not doing that either. So he had him executed. And I do think, you know, if Doughty hadn't been such a poisonous man, then, you know, he wouldn't have got killed. It's that simple. And he wouldn't kind of back down, and he wouldn't bow down to Drake's authority. So you can't go into these dangerous waters where no Englishmen have been before with someone like that just turning crew after crew against the whole voyage and against Drake. So what else could he do? You know, it's interesting. It's around this sort of time as well that, so earlier in the voyage they landed on the more northerly part of South America, and then they were landing on the beach, and they were trying to get some fresh food and stuff, and then some local Indians would come down and look at them from a distance, and then Drake used a technique that he used before where he would try and befriend them. See, that's what he liked doing, and he would go and put some stakes on the ground and then put like gifts on them. So he'd like drive some stakes into the beach and then hang like some hats and like some trinkets and stuff on them, and then retreat. And then the Indians would come up and take the gifts. And gradually they started to become friendly. And then the Indians started coming into the English camp, and they would sit around the fires together, and the Englishmen would like give them stuff, and then they'd like bring them some fruit, and just they were having a laugh and having a nice time and everything. And Drake that's always what he wants to do. He's always like trying to be friendly with the locals. And then he does this when he goes down to the southern point of South America, does the same thing. Some Indians come along, you know, they've always got spears and stuff. And then Drake's like, oh, it's the Indians. I like Indians, you know, my mates. But obviously there's like 2,000 miles between that part, and they're like entirely different people, like entirely different ethnicities, and like they're not just Indians, they're totally different. And
are we like on the Pacific coast of South America at this point?
Not yet. No, they haven't crossed yet. It's right in the very bottom, just before you go into the Magellan Strait, around the bottom of South America. So it's still down there. And we assume that because the Spanish have been there many times before over the last decades, that the Spanish had done some bad stuff to the Indians, or these particular Indians were just homicidal. But basically, they were trying to befriend these Indians. And then Drake made a pretty terrible error, basically. So it was him and then just 6 of his men, and they rowed to shore. But they weren't even properly armed. They had, like, all the men obviously had swords at their hips, but there was only one arquebus and one longbow between the 6 of them. And there was a few Indians there on the beach, and they marched up saying, hello, like, can we be friends, sort of thing. And then the Indians were like wary, and this sort of stuff happens a lot during this whole period, right up until, you know, the Captain Cook, you know, getting...
I was just about to say, it really puts me in mind of Captain Cook, this.
yeah, exactly. This happens all the time, where there's this kind of like edgy standoff, and then there's some misunderstanding, and then it instantly turns into horrific massacre. You know, like some some taboo is broken without realizing, or there's someone snatches something from one of the Englishmen and they go, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then it just like, and then something snaps, and then all of the Indians just fall upon them and start hacking them up. And that's kind of what happened with this. But one of the Indians are like, "Oh, look at that longbow. That longbow looks amazing." And there's this guy called Robert Winter, one of the sailors, and he's showing the Indians how to what the power of the English longbow, and he's shooting, and the Indians have got their long kind of spindly bows, that are good enough to shoot down a monkey or an iguana or whatever. And the Englishman is like, "Look at this, bow! Look at the power of it." I think Ray Mears does that with a tribe in South America, doesn't he? While he's doing that, the string breaks, and then apparently the Indians they think, "Oh, now the English don't have any weapons or something." But the second the string breaks, they all just kill him. So one of them shoots an arrow into the longbowman. It goes straight into his lungs, and he just falls down, drowning on his own blood. And then the sailor with the arquebus shoots the guy, or tries to shoot the Indian who just shot his mate, but the powder is damp or something and it misfires. And then so the Indians shoot the next guy with their arrows, and the arrow goes right through him, so the point sticking out of his back. So there's 2 English dead in like 2 seconds, and there's only Drake and 4 other guys on the beach.